say. We'll get to that a little later. So by day, I run crypto marketing for a few ICOs, and by night, I lead the SF chapter of Startup Grind. Has anyone here been to a Startup Grind? Is that a name anyone knows? Sweet. So at Startup Grind, we have a special tradition that I want to bring here. And to do that, hope you guys aren't too cool, to close your eyes for just 1 second. Do you mind doing that for me? Now, while we do this, imagine that you just heard one of the most enlightening, inspiring, fire in your belly conversations with James. He's a total badass. You're going to hear a lot about him. But as you do that, please give him a huge round of applause as he comes to the stage.
Hello, everyone.
So James does incredible technology innovation for a company called Omega One. We're going to talk about that. But it wasn't just that. He's done incredible things in VR. He's been in the music scene. And he's even been one of the first few pioneers in high-frequency trading. I'm going to talk about all of that. But first, I figured we'd start a little more personal to actually humanize you as a person.
Sounds good.
So why don't you take us back a little bit and tell us about sort of, what are the first inflection points that actually got you thinking about the things that you think about now that got you to this seat?
That's easy. I mean, it's when my parents had the foresight to get me a Commodore 64 computer and a 300 baud modem, which I don't even know how many people here know what that means, 300 baud modem, because now we're always talking gigabits. Yay. Someone had one? Okay, well, if you trace back into the speeds of the internet, all the way back to the very first time you could connect to another computer over a phone line, before the internet actually, it was at 300 baud, which meant that the characters would come on one at a time. And so I got one of those when I was 8 years old and wrote my first computer program, and I still remember it. I remember it was 3 lines, and this was like the pivotal day for me when I became a coder at 8. And I remember you used to number your lines in the Commodore. It was 10, A equals A plus 1, 20, print A, 30. Go to 10. Hit enter, and all of a sudden it's counting. I was like, look at this, everyone. I wrote a program.
Auto-magically.
And then I did everything I could then to stay out of school after that and to stay home and program my computer.
Yeah. Well, how old was that? Was that
8 years old.
8 years old?
In 1983.
Yeah. Now, what parents did you have that had that foresight? What do they do? How do they think?
Well, that was a big part of... I don't know exactly how it happened, but even before that, my father had a TRS-80 Model 3 computer. We're talking some of the earliest computers just past the Homebrew Computer Club and around that time of personal computers. I don't know exactly how that he first got into it, but that was a major influence in me, and I'm really thankful that I went down that direction of getting a computer, because it fundamentally changed the way that my brain was wired.
Yeah, and you actually talked about this a little bit earlier, that one of the favorite things you do is trail running, right? And you do a lot of your programming there.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder, what else have you been thinking about in those runs? What sort of things are you thinking about, whether it's crypto or it's VR? You've been sort of all across the spectrum, and sort of wonder what that stage sets.
Well, I spent the last 4 years before getting involved in this whole blockchain space as a virtual reality creator, because I got one of the very first Oculus Rifts, like the very first one when it came out before Facebook bought them and everything. I said, this is just amazing. And so I spent 4 years building virtual reality experiences. I think there's a ton of future in that, but particularly I'm excited about the application of all these technologies, the 3D and VR and all these sort of next generation experiential visual technologies as they are applied to blockchain, and particularly to crypto trading in general. I think we're about to see a whole new era of a whole new way of interacting with markets in general. And so I'm super excited about bringing all those skills and the love I have for building beautiful things out of three-dimensional blocks in the computer space to the world of blockchain and crypto trading.
Sweet. And it's interesting because these words are starting to converge a little bit. And then sort of, a few orders of abstraction from you having your first computer, you got into trading. And I wonder if you could tell us that story.
Okay, well, this goes back to, so there was this thing that went on in the late 90s. You might call it the electronification of trading, of Wall Street. It used to be papers, and it used to be the realm solely of guys from Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch. But then in a matter of 2 or 3 years, it all of a sudden became possible for average people to gain access to the market and trade. There was early like E-Trade Online. Even before that, there was one called Daytech Online. And I found out about this, and this was right after well, in high school, I went to, I homeschooled my senior year in high school, right? And so when it came time to get my diploma, this is the context. I actually told my parents, I said, I don't want it. I don't want a diploma.
Bold.
And I said, they're like, what do you mean you don't want your diploma? Because I completed all of my coursework and I needed to mail away for it. And I told them at the time, 18-year-old me, told them, I said, someday I'm going to do something big. And somebody's going to write a book about me, and I want it in there that I did it without a high school diploma. And so I declined my diploma, and about within the next 6 months to a year, I had a NASDAQ trading account.
How'd that happen?
I was a kid in the Poconos. I grew up in the Poconos. I actually was friends with the owner of a large ski resort complex out there, who was an investment banker that had connections to Wasserstein and Perella era on Wall Street, you know, the Michael Milken era and all that. And I used to be the kid that when we would go over to her house after snowboarding, well, 10 kids would go over there, I would hang out with the dad in the den, you know, when we'd have our smoking jackets on and talk business, you know. And then I said, there's this thing called day trading. And I bring this up particularly because I see it as a direct predecessor to what's happening in the crypto markets right now and in blockchain in general, in the sense that there was this new explosion of technology, which meant a transfer of influence and power, where if it was 2 years earlier, there's no way a kid from the Poconos is going to get onto the NASDAQ stock market. But I convinced this guy, and he funded a NASDAQ trading account, and then I ended up getting on a plane a week later to go out and live with and work with the owner of the largest day trading firm happening at the time. It was called Block Trading. They were opening 200 offices around the country, and I got involved real early trading and eventually running my own NASDAQ trading floor. I didn't own it, but I operated it with 50 traders, and then ended up moving on a couple years later, where for a brief while, I ran 10% of NASDAQ every day through my desk. So I would have 8 monitors, and the market would open, and phones would be ringing, and I was running all this. So if a line went down, there'd be people screaming at me, and I'd have to fix it and deal with it all. And that was out of not graduating high school. So
Sure. What did that teach
I highly
you
recommend
then?
that.
You know, you're fairly young, managing a whole bunch of people, a whole not just a desk but a floor.
Yeah.
And I imagine that didn't all go down so easy.
Oh, it was the most pressure I think you can have in a job that does not involve live fire. It was very much like what I see when people are out in a military operation. I mean, of course, there was not actually bullets flying, but we did have we had a closet that was filled with broken 21-inch monitors and keyboards because traders used to throw monitors across the room. And I would have to say, now calm down, don't do that, you know?
Sure enough.
And so I've had to deal with some really, really intense operational situations there. And I grew up real fast, you know, because when you have millions of dollars at stake that can be lost in a moment, and it's all running through these wires, and it's your job to keep them all up and running, you get serious quick.
Sure. And I wonder, were you finding yourself better at the people part or at the trading part?
Well, see, this is where the whole Commodore 64 thing comes back in, because I started looking at markets in a way that the people around me generally were not, because I was an outsider in this NASDAQ trading world that was filled with people from Ivy Leagues and things like that. But see, I was this kid with a Commodore 64, and so I was always thinking about the algorithm. I was always thinking about how can you, even from that very early time on NASDAQ, I was thinking, these people are pressing these buttons. There's got to be a way that you could write a program that would essentially press the buttons for you. And faster, right? And so I started investigating that, and after a while, I became one of the first people. Myself and a small team built the first trading language on Wall Street that allowed you to express a new kind of program trading systems that were focused on the market microstructure, the liquidity. So you could say, if there's so many bids and only so many offers, then put my bid here, and if I get hit, then sell it to here. And so I basically invented this little program that just made money automatically.
You said you were sometimes 2xing your investment.
Oh yeah, there's this thing called a Sharpe ratio. It's sort of the ratio of how much. It's this financial metric
Just jargon,
that we were like 10x beyond anything out there. So this thing would sometimes I put in $50,000 and it would make $100,000 in a month, and it would never lose because it would never hold a position for more than a half a second. So holding a position for 1 second, and certainly never overnight, that it just made money automatically every day, and I operated these things and scaled them up, and you might think that that would just be a happy ending, but it didn't really all go down that way.
Yeah, so what happened next?
Well,
There's so much money flying around, you might think some dark interests got involved.
you know, there's this whole thing about decentralization now and blockchain.
I keep hearing about that.
You know, it's this thing that people are really excited about, and one of the reasons they're excited about it is because there's this thing called disintermediation. Disintermediation, what's that mean? It means that every step of the way there's these middlemen that act as gatekeepers in the traditional world. And man, did I run into that. Because at that time on Wall Street, it attracted a criminal element. And I'm not going to name names right now. If you talk to me in person, if you're back there, I'll talk to you if there's a better context than this. But
wine outside here or output after this.
But basically, some of the people that were running the firms that I was trading through, that is, they were my service provider.
Right.
They were the holders of the money every month that I would earn, and they would be the ones that would have to pay me at the end of the month the money that my machines made and that they had contracted to give me, like my bank. But these guys weren't Citibank. These guys were some thugs. These guys were some Staten Island boys that used to brag to me in meetings about how he and his boys would knock off UPS trucks with shotguns. And when he would say he was changing his deal and not paying me out the money that he said he would pay me, and I said anything about it, this guy would threaten to send a man with no name and no face to my house and kill me.
Wow.
This was a day at the office.
Sure.
And
What age again?
I was probably 22, 23 there. And so essentially what happened is I invented these boxes, and then a series of increasingly influential and powerful Wall Street people, which had legal teams that they could afford to pay $800 an hour to just clean up after them, literally and actually stole what I had made, to the point where I would come in sometimes and my boxes, that I had 5 boxes, they were pulled out of the wall and there was Ethernet cables there and they were gone. And my former partners supposedly ran away with these boxes. And so I would go set up again with a more powerful guy on Wall Street and say, listen, I know how to make these I have this goose, it lays a golden egg. You know, let's just hook this up, back me, and we'll do it again. And eventually it happened at such a large scale that I had to quit.
How many iterations of this did you end up doing?
Basically, it was 3 major iterations with 3 different sets of partners that at varying levels criminally stole my company from me. The most serious time was when the owner of this large company that I had before been running the whole company, they were doing 10% of NASDAQ's volume every day, many billions of shares a month. And this guy decided to sell his company. And so he wanted his balance sheet to look good. So he had this bright idea that what he could do is just stop paying me at the end of the month. So here I am with my partners. I'm a 33% partner in this trading firm.
Why not just stop paying everybody?
Well, he was doing this to a lot of other people. You mentioned this guy's name, and everyone on Wall Street says, oh, he was doing that to other people too.
Yeah.
But essentially, there was this time when my business partner said, I'm getting evicted from my house, and we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars accrued that's owed to us. And basically what happened is I called up this guy, this powerful guy that my partner said, I shouldn't even call him up because he's the powerful guy, just wait, he'll pay us. But I said, no, you're getting evicted from your house. I called him up and told this guy that what he was doing was wrong. And what he did is, instead of listening to me and saying, okay, I'll pay you, he actually said to me, this Wall Street guy, he said, you haven't seen anything, you haven't seen me steal from you yet. I'm the devil and you're gonna feel the devil's wrath.
Wow.
And then he said that, this guy. And then he hung up the phone and he picked up the phone and called my own partners that I was going to bat for and said, if James ever gets another penny, I'm not paying you anything, kick him out. Wow. And they cowed to him and kicked me out on the street and ripped up criminally the K-1 documents that said I was ever a partner. And then drove me out of my own trading operation because I confronted this guy for the evil he was doing. And this has something to do with why I'm excited about blockchain.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love kind of weaving this, like hearing you weave the story of how exactly you got each chip on your shoulder.
Well, it's a recognition that I, relative to the average, investment banker of that era, came into this world somewhat disadvantaged. Not to say I'm a disadvantaged person, but in that arena of major influence. And I tried to kind of get into there, but that old system pushed me out. And all I was trying to do was deal honestly and bless those that were around me with profits and but there was this chain of people that you needed to have this chain of trust. And there was a chain of trust where all these people that had their own agendas and their own things going on, that happened to be a lot of bad people in that arena, they had to keep their word every step of the way for me to continue doing honest business. Sure. And so there was a weakness in that. And this is why I'm really excited about decentralization in general, blockchain in general, because now there's entirely new categories of business structures and whereby the disbursement of money, for instance, can be enforced by code, to where it's not in this guy's hands to pay me out my money every month because the system does it. And that's appealing. And I think it presents a lot of opportunity for honest dealers to deal honestly and work well together, and it tends against these kind of guys that want to be there just to squeeze people and do evil to them.
And yet, during your sort of early mid-20s, the blockchain wasn't quite around yet. So what is it that you did? It seemed a little bit battered and bruised, right?
Yeah.
How did you recover, firstly, emotionally and psychologically? And then what did you end up doing once you were sort of whole again?
It was wild because I spent the next 10 years, right around, this all culminated, things really changed around 9/11 in a lot of ways on Wall Street. People started to really grab on to people's attitudes changed. They weren't so much into opportunity anymore, and they were scared in a lot of ways. And so this was right around the time that I got driven out of that, and I ended up spending 10 years in just obscurity. I had taught myself to be a computer programmer because I programmed my own automated trading systems. And then I had been doing the most exciting thing I could imagine, and now that was just gone. Then NASDAQ consolidated. There was all these reasons why I couldn't get back in. It was like this gate shut. And so I spent 10 years doing some of the most boring computer programming work. Like I did document management for Morgan Stanley as a consultant, like the software that would run through Microsoft Word documents and format it. I felt like it was just a complete bummer. And so I used that time really when I just had a regular job to cultivate a lot of other interests and abilities, which started as sort of intense hobbies, but are now very relevant to me in everything I'm doing now. First off, I've been a music producer for the whole time, an electronic music producer, and I've spent thousands of hours producing tracks and things like that. And so I was focusing.
What's your SoundCloud?
It's James Andrew. Yeah, it's James Andrew.
Check it out.
And I really was influenced a lot by the electronic music of the late 90s, which some of us are old enough to remember. There was a few years when electronic music was actually awesome, and you didn't have to be embarrassed to say you like EDM. And so I don't like EDM in general. There's this other kind of music that had real beauty associated with it, and I've still been trying to make that the whole time. And so that was something that sort of kept me sane throughout this, having this artistic outlet. But then I also I pursued throughout that whole era, I've always had a love for things like 3D graphics, and I became an intense student of CG post effects, like the kind of things that you see in Hollywood movies when they're doing Iron Man, like how you do the
What were you making in this case?
Oh, I've got on my Vimeo, I can show you, I was doing all sorts of things. Like I was doing things like I was one of the first people to get a Kinect, the Microsoft Kinect, that senses your motion, and I hacked it open and figured out how to make a motion capture rig where I could stand in front of my computer. This is in 2009. I have video of me standing there as a robot talking with real lip syncing, and I would call people up on Skype as a CG rendered robot talking to them. And there was all these things that I was like, this is going to be the thing that's going to elevate me out of this horrible situation of having to go to this regular cubicle. And I'd be there like doing 3D renders on all the computers at the works where I was at. I would wherever I would work, I would make a render farm out of like 10 computers and be there at 2 o'clock.
For mining, if only.
Yeah, right. I didn't do that. Actually, I did a little bit of mine in 2011, but not much. So I was cultivating a lot of skills, which it turns out now in what I'm doing happen to be really, really relevant.
And sort of around this time, I think you were beginning to get into VR, right? Not just to connect, but you have ended up getting an Oculus Rift. Right?
Yeah, so I got an Oculus Rift in 2013. So in VR time, that's a long time. I was one of the very first guys or girls to get one. And right the week that I got it, I found out that Oculus, everyone knows Oculus, right? That's the company that Facebook bought famously for $2 billion for this thing. I got one of those, and I built this helicopter flying game in it, because I was like, well, this is obvious what I want to do. Put a helicopter in a city and fly around it in VR. And Oculus was having their very first ever public event. Yeah. The time that they came out to the world and said, hey, we're Oculus. They did it in Boston. I found out about it on Reddit and put my computer under my arm and just drove up there. And they ended up giving me a table, and I had the longest line there. And that time I just fell in love with the smile I could put on people's faces by making these VR experiences and games. And I just fell in love and devoted so much time to it and got some level of sort of internet fame on the Reddit and everything, because there was only 1,000 people doing it in the world. And about 6 months later, I was up on stage in the Computer History Museum in Palo Alto for the first ever Silicon Valley VR Expo and Conference. I'm back there in 2014 as one of the first indie VR developers, and so I knew all the original guys that did it, and I ended up going on to teach VR extensively at Microsoft through a company called Playcrafting. I've taught like a dozen VR courses now, and I've done a lot of really fun stuff, particularly working on this game called Zone, which this is like my passion project. I have this game called Zone, which I would have loved to bring tonight, but it still will get out there and people will see it. So I've been working on this game for 4 years.
What's the premise?
The premise is that you are Zone and you are a gem collector. And you are flying through this infinite world, collecting these gems and going faster and faster. And there's this whole premise to it that's deeper, that has to do with very basic questions about AI and consciousness and a lot of really very, very interesting things. But what it really came down to is it was a way to take my music production, synchronize it with VR to where you're flying through this infinite world with the trance music, and it's all synchronized in this really novel way, and it's amazing. And it's like, I still love it. And so I spent the next 3 years touring the world with this. I mean, thousands of people have played it, but it just was never the right time to get it out there to the market because of the nature of the VR industry and the lack of maturity of it. And so I was going full bore on that with a day job. And then I got a day job at this company called UVisit, which is here in New York, the largest VR company in New York. And I ended up doing technical direction there and all sorts of things based upon the rep I got for being this game maker. And so that brought us up to about 3, 4, 5 months ago, when I saw everything happening in blockchain, I said, whoa, I got to pause this VR stuff.
But it wasn't, when you told me the story, it wasn't so clean. It was the way that you met your current CEO that really struck me.
Oh, wait, you mean at Omega?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I'm at Omega 1 right now. And the way that...
What is Omega 1?
What is Omega 1? Okay, Omega 1 is awesome, first of all. Omega 1 is we are a company founded by Alex Gordon-Brander, our founder and CEO, and several of people that he knew that worked for Bridgewater. Bridgewater is the largest hedge fund in the world.
Yeah.
And
great book now, Principles, Ray
Dalio's Principles. So these were some senior people that worked there for years. Alex himself was responsible for building several very globally significant trading platforms that have traded many trillions of dollars by now. And so they had this serious sort of pedigree, you might say, in the markets. And then they saw everything happening in crypto, and they see the current state of things in crypto, that it's very immature. Trading crypto is very immature, such that it's very difficult for large institutions to take it seriously. And so Omega 1, so Omega 1 is a leading contender to solve those problems, the problems of liquidity, security, and transparency. And I found out about Omega 1, and I said, wait a minute, this is like what I was doing on NASDAQ, except they're doing it here. Maybe it's time, maybe this is it. And this when I saw that first off, that blockchain and crypto trading were happening, I started to think this is the time to get back in there and to do what I couldn't do last time.
Did you ever try to do anything to replicate sort of your independent success in the algorithmic trading, flash trading world, in the crypto world? Is that
yes,
something you played
in
with?
2011, I actually started looking at arbitraging the crypto markets. So I connected to all the various markets and made an aggregated view of all the markets. And I saw the opportunities, but I concluded that the infrastructure was not there yet because you had to transfer dollars from one bank to another. And there was all these problems that made me look away and say, it's just not doable. Then I look back 3 years later and now it's doable. And so the way that I got this job here at Omega now is I saw that Alex was speaking at an event very much like this about 3.5 months ago. And I said, I'm going to
be your chance, guys.
And I said, I'm going to go there and I'm going to show him my 3D trading stuff. Because what I didn't mention is back when I was doing the NASDAQ trading stuff, I was applying three-dimensional game graphics, video game technology graphics, like the kind of stuff you'd see on an Xbox, to markets. So I came up with this novel way of viewing markets as a three-dimensional stream of data, almost like a canyon run, but the canyon's the bit in the ass, right?
Is it synchronized to trance music?
Yeah, actually on the video that I made of it, yes, of course. In fact, I even timed the crescendo of it as it breaks to a new price level. Yeah, totally. I have ideas for AI generative music to reinforce the traders' ideas, you know, as that's going to build as you're in your position, you know? And so I always had this vision of trading as a game. And I saw that it was being filtered through this lens of numbers that would move like this. And it was like trying to read the green text in the matrix, and you're trying to figure out what it means. That's what everyone's doing trading. Look at all these numbers. When really what you have is structures of liquidity moving. It's like this river flowing. And so I used game graphics at the time. And if you ask me later, I'll show you this on my phone. We don't have a big screen here. But
do you want to just hold it up for a minute? I mean, I think we can actually get.
Well, here I'll show one thing.
Yeah.
So what I did is right before I met Alex at this event, I said, let me apply this to crypto markets. And I will show this thing. This is something that I did before Omega. See this here? See this red in the screen? I'm going to walk around for this a little bit. See this? It's like a wave. You see this? This is the bid and the offer of BTCE. This is Ethereum climbing up with bids into sell pressure from walls. Basically, the height of this represents the quantity of the liquidity. And this runs live on my phone. This was a screenshot of my phone. That represents the past. And so basically, you can see these markets like a wave cresting. And so I'm seeing this, and I'm thinking, if I'm a trader, and everyone else is looking at numbers, that if I have something like this, and I can act on it holistically, I can look at it intuitively, this is a great thing. And so I went to this event, and I ended up sitting on the couch with Alex after. I said, listen, I got to show you this. You know, you got to see this, and we got to work together. And he said, his first thing he ever said to me, he said, it has been a lifelong dream to bring three-dimensional visualization to the markets. And he has this awesome British accent, you know? And I was like, well, I'm your man. And we sat down, and we just started talking, and the short of it was about 4 days later, I was on a plane to Cancun for the Ethereum Developers Conference. I hadn't even met the rest of the team. And so Omega hired me, and I want to be clear that this 3D thing is not the main premise of Omega 1. Omega 1 has an amazing premise of there's this back end we're building of basically solving the problems that are preventing large money from moving into the markets. But they have been, to this point, very receptive to the ideas that I'm having of that crypto trading itself needs a complete overhaul to where it shouldn't necessarily be just a web app with charts and graphs, but there's a lot of technology that has happened that has been underexposed in this world. And so now I'm working every day. In fact, Bracy, my friend Bracy here, he's working with me at Omega right now. I've hired a team for the last couple of weeks of Unity developers. Yeah. So we've got to be the only crypto trading entity that has Unity 3D developers working on market visualizations that we're getting ready to bring to Davos to present at Davos in 2 weeks.
I mean, that is a pretty niche qualifier.
But but I think it's going to become a big deal.
That's cool. What I really love is that when we were starting to do a little prep, we really did vibe on the idea that crypto is an opportunity for everybody to get into trading.
Yes.
And if they're going to do that, staring at pips is a terrible way to spend your time.
Totally. Yes. Let me talk about that for a minute. I think that we're going to see this. Okay, let's. This is a little bit of a stretch, but I think it's a plausible scenario.
Fair enough.
So, first off, do you guys know what's happening with the security tokens with T0 and there's some other, a couple other contenders? So basically right now when you trade stocks, you have to go to the stock market to trade stocks, but essentially the stock of companies is going to become tokenized. So average people are going to be able to trade tokens that represent Apple and Microsoft. Now, if you try to walk into the Apple store with saying, look, I own Apple, can you please give me preferential treatment at the Genius Bar? They're going to say, what are you, crazy? There's no interaction between trading and investing in the consumer world. But once this happens, you're going to be able to have Apple tokens on your phone and go into the Apple store and spend them or use them for preferential treatment there. And so people are going to have an interest in trading and accruing these tokens. So all of a sudden, consumers are going to be able to participate in a new way in ownership or partial ownership of securities. And there's a lot of regulation around this that's going to be going to be worked out. But I think that what's going to happen is average people are going to, as they are now in crypto already, people are thinking about trading in markets that never thought about trading in markets before. So now that this is going to happen, this is going to be a big impact. Another major impact is that online games, do you know online games until recently, the market for online game materials like upgrades and clothing and things for games was until recently larger than the entire crypto market capitalization. It's a very serious marketplace worth many, many tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, right? And what's going to happen is online games are more and more going to become tokenized, so the in-game economies are going to have tokens, and the gamers are going to start to realize that they could trade these tokens outside of the given game. And so there is a scenario in which the worlds of online social gaming and crypto trading converge. And the technologies of the two converge as well. And this is about the same time that the AI is going to be taking everybody's jobs. So people may very well, as a global occupation, start to game for money instead of going to work driving the truck every day. This is real. And I believe that this whole world of this new kind of trading needs a new entire overhaul away from, like you say, the pips and everything that, if you trace it back, goes back to this archaic invention, which was amazing at the time, called the ticker tape. It was a piece of tape with prices that would come out on it. And then they put it in columns on a computer, and they said this is trading. But now there's a whole new way of looking at markets and having this edge of having three-dimensional graphics and being able to see intuitively what's happening in the flow. It really is very much like being in a river that's flowing left and right, and maybe you don't know where that river's going, but if you're in a tube and you're going around the corner, you can kind of get a sense you're going to keep going around the corner. And so I'm excited about building these kind of tools.
So the tools are sort of one on-ramp, maybe games are another on-ramp, but what are some of the existing barriers to the masses trading?
Well, there's definitely a lot of regulatory issues right now, because right now there's this thing called being, you have to be an accredited investor to do certain kinds of investing. And I think that this right here is something that's going to need to change. I mean, the whole idea in America, there's this thing called an accredited investor. Well, does everybody know that there's certain kinds of things you can't invest in, most things, unless you make over $250,000 a year or just have a certain amount of net worth.
Or $400,000 if you're a pair, I think.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really archaic rules where just because somebody has that much money in the bank does not mean they are necessarily a responsible individual. And there might be some 18-year-old kid that might be very ready to trade
and running a trading floor.
Right. And so this is a very interesting factor, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it transpires globally, because this is the kind of case where the U.S. could lose out if the U.S. doesn't accommodate this new desire that people have to interact with markets in this new way, where other countries could potentially attract these crypto nomads, we call. I've been calling us crypto nomads.
I definitely want to come back to that. The crypto nomad element is very interesting. So we got regulation. I want to dive a little deeper on that. Is there anything else that comes to mind that might be a barrier to folks jumping in?
Jumping into trading right now?
Yeah.
I think that the interfaces and the tools to it are a huge barrier to it. I mean, if you just try to trade crypto right now and then you're faced with the interface at GDAX or Poloniex or Bittrex or Bitfinex or any of these, you've got to learn a whole set of skills that are utterly alien to most younger people growing up now, I would say. And that's a big barrier.
Agreed. So in terms of the actual regulation, we've talked about Zug and a few other places. I've got a special thing for China. We can talk about that. But where are places getting it right? And what does that look like?
where are places getting it right?
Yeah, what countries maybe are doing interesting things in regulation?
Well, Zug is one that's interesting. It's also really interesting in Estonia. There's this concept of digital not digital citizenship. They call it digital e-residency. That's what it is. And so there are these countries which that's really kind of interesting that you're now able to get this thing called an e-residency and do certain kinds of businesses in Estonia that might be attractive in a way that your local nation does not attract this type of business, particularly related to blockchain and crypto. And so I think it's really interesting to see nations start to compete to attract business in a way. And so there's this interesting scenario in which nations that are, I think also Belarus recently just said that they're going to do some really interesting things with crypto regulation. So there could be these lesser known powers that in a very short time, in a matter of months or brief amount of years, could become much more significant powers because they're saying, come here, because we're not going to get in the way of you doing the kind of business that you want to do. Because after all this decentralized technology is global inherently.
Now, the one thing I wanted to do to play a little bit devil's advocate, I think it's a really fun case study, is a country will adopt blockchain, say, very readily. And the one that really comes to mind is China. And there definitely is many more people than there will be labor availability. And being a one-party state, it needs to find a way to keep people happy. So you think universal basic income, right? And putting people on some sort of blockchain and distributing money that way is really interesting. But another sort of, shall we say, innovation that they're planning is the sort of citizen score. Based on certain variables of how you perform and ways you show up politically, you get a better or worse score. It's like a Black Mirror episode in my mind.
San Junipero, wasn't it?
Right. And so, you have a citizen score, you already have an ID that might be tokenized in some way on the blockchain, and then you have a government that's doling out your only income, and you may very well, with blockchain's help, pacify an entire country.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you navigate, the dystopian version of this?
Yeah, just because blockchain's awesome, but blockchain could certainly be used for something like that. And this is a perfect example of why I'm beelining with myself and my own friends to the point where we are not financially tied down to any one geographical area, because any particular geographical area, there could be some sort of a regime shift or a change, or the people in power there could start to implement something like that, which could make life undesirable to be in. And so I think that but the blockchain also presents a potential solution to this, because it now is possible to have wealth that exists in the cloud, as it were, or on the blockchain in ways that was not possible before. And so I think getting to that point where you and the people that you love are financially liberated enough to be able to go to the place that isn't doing that.
Right.
So maybe it's going to be China, maybe it could be here. Who knows?
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen, but the blockchain and decentralization provide technologies that tend toward the ability of average people to guide their life in a direction to being more global and being not tied down to any one location and being able to move from place to place. And I think that one thing that we can be sure is going to increase in this world in the near term is volatility. That's been happening. There's just more and more volatility. And so before blockchain and before decentralization in the old way, when you're tied down to your 9-to-5 job collecting your paycheck in US dollars, you're kind of stuck. And you can't go to the other place necessarily with your family and those that you care about. And not that this immediately solves all those problems, but it provides avenues whereby you can guide your life in a direction to have more liberty like that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you are expected to do in order to take advantage of things is to assume radical responsibility for what work you do, where you live, how you manage your exposure to, say, taxation, government, etc. And we were beginning to touch on this a little bit. But the digital nomad movement, has come and it's here to stay, it seems. But you want to take it a step further, right? Crypto nomads. What's that all about?
Well, there's this. I just noticed this category of people. I call us crypto nomads that are. I mean, I'm starting to travel the world more now. I'm going to a couple different places coming up soon. But there are people. There's people that are making money in crypto and that are starting to travel the world and starting to realize that, hey, this could be kind of a cool way to live. And there are some people who are now making products and services to help support that lifestyle in others. There's my friend Pavel, for instance, who's making my friend Pavel, who I met in Ethereum DevCon. We ended up on this 65-foot yacht and cruising around the Cancun at 2 in the morning, and as one does down there. And he said, I made all this money in crypto, and what I realized I really love is being hospitable to my friends and inviting them over for food and taking care of them. And so what he's doing is he's turning his crypto wealth into the world's first chain of hotels. They're modular hotels that are so cool design. All the rooms have slides that go down into ball pits, and they're all solar powered. They're modular. They're solar powered, and they only take crypto, and they use excess solar capacity on the island to mine crypto. Yep. And so he's opening this chain of hotels catering to these crypto nomads that want to go live 3 months in the Bahamas and 3 months in Hawaii and 3 months here and there, and it's all run on crypto.
Love it.
And so there's this.
What is it called?
I don't know the name of it. It's called. His name is Pavel Alva.
Yeah, I think we all want to.
Pavel Alva. It's really cool. Yeah, just look up Pavel.
You got it.
Yeah,
he's gonna get 50 friend requests.
Yeah,
this is gonna be really good.
I'll tell you his name right here, just because I'll give a shout out to him.
Let's spell it out for everybody.
It's Pawelalva. Pavel Alva.
I think it's a Polish name.
Yeah, and he's CEO of Better World International. He calls it. And you know what? This is an example of someone though that he's doing this thing. But what I think of is Pavel, this guy I met, and immediately I became friends with him. And that's the other aspect of this crypto thing that I think is amazing, is I spent 4 years in VR, and I didn't walk away with 50 friends even from there. Yeah. But now I've been here in 3 months, and I look around this room, and there's probably 30 people in here that I already call friends, and we hang out, and I think that there's this real refreshing sort of desire to be open and to collaborate on things in this culture, and it's really cool.
Yeah,
so
love that. So. You wanted to talk about community, and I think that's probably one of the most important parts of the blockchain sort of zeitgeist. What does that mean to you exactly?
With the community?
Yeah, what does community mean at all? Yeah.
Well, lately, I'll tell you, I've got this little thing called the treehouse. Who's in the treehouse? Raise your hand.
Holy crap.
Yeah,
squad
a good amount of the room is in the treehouse. What is the treehouse?
It's exactly what it sounds
like. It's James's Crypto Treehouse. It's this little Telegram group I made, which if you're not on Telegram, get on Telegram, ask me how, ask someone. Yep. It's this secure messenger, right? And I made this little group on there to invite my friends to go out and do social events, various social events, because there's a lot of social events related to crypto. And I'll tell you, this last week I got sick. I just got over the flu. I'm not contagious anymore. I had it for 6 days though. But throughout the whole time, I was there. I was totally kept company, because now I have 650 people in my little Telegram group that pretty much look to me to say where to go and what to do.
That's pretty good. You should launch an ICO soon.
We're working on that, because actually Telegram is launching a token. I don't know if you saw this, but I'll tell you what community means to me. I'll tell you, during the time I was sick, probably a dozen people from the group offered to come bring me tea, or literally were saying, I will come to you in Williamsburg, we'll be bringing you whatever you need. And I didn't want to get anyone sick, so I said no. But that's cool. I genuinely care for the people in my group, and I know that there's this sense of human tenderness and care that it was just devoid on Wall Street. Not there. If I went to a Wall Street party, it wasn't, I didn't seek to find friends that I might know 10 years from now. And so I feel that there is that. There's people that I have a lot of friends that I genuinely consider friends now, that we are all bonded by this shared excitement that we have, that there's an alternative to kind of the way things were going 5 years ago.
Yeah.
In a lot of major ways. Not to say that this solves every problem, but there's a ray of hope when it comes to human social interaction.
Yeah, love it. So we've covered, everything from community, VR, to trading, to visualizing many of those things simultaneously, to trance music. But what I really wanted to give you the chance to do is to talk about a question that I think will come up during Q&A. We'll definitely do that, a few minutes of that.
Cool.
Which is, you have a really elegant explanation for this. Why does blockchain, not blockchain, but why does Bitcoin actually have value?
Oh, this is important. Why does a Bitcoin have value? Because I think this is a thing that some people skip over, and they get into talking about this ICO or that ICO, but don't really have a fundamental understanding of why this stuff is worth anything, or is it? Is this just a big Ponzi scheme, or does a Bitcoin have value? And I want to just give my understanding of that, because I think there's a real merit to it, and that is this. First off, there's this concept of intrinsic value. I mean, what is value after all? What is money after all? I mean, I never examined these questions, even on Wall Street, with the depth that I've had to examine them in crypto. And if you really look at it, money is a technology. It's a technology for collaboration. So if you're a bunch of people on an island together and one of you is digging ditches and the other one's fishing and the other one's putting up a tent, there's only so much that you can do if you try to trade the actual output of your labor. But if you find a bunch of shells and you say, hey, you know what, we're going to represent 1 hour of our work as a shell, then all of a sudden you can start doing each other's chores in a way that's equitable, and you can store up a shell and use it later for something else, and that's money. And the shell has certain properties that make it useful. You can't really break a shell in half without it being known that it was broken in half. And so gold has traditionally been the standard, what you call store of value. And it has this thing that economists call intrinsic value. You hear this, gold has intrinsic value, but I bet you very few people here could tell me what that means. I never could until a few weeks ago. I actually got this from Trace Meyer, who's like a really, really great commentator on these things. The idea of intrinsic value means that the thing that has value that's being used to represent value is limited by its internal characteristics. So an ounce of gold is an ounce of gold because it has an exact number of atoms of gold in it. And this is why I can give you gold, an ounce of gold, and you know that you're going to take that ounce of gold and you don't care where I got it from because it's limited by its intrinsic value. And this is not the case with US dollars, for instance. US dollars have what's called extrinsic value, meaning the value of that dollar fluctuates based upon external control, in this case of a corporation conveniently called the Federal Reserve. No relation to the government, by the way. And this organization, this company, changes the value of our dollars, generally decreasing them over the years by these things called quantitative easings and liquidity infusions, which basically they just print more money. More monopoly money, right? And so that has a weakness to it, that it's controlled by external business interests that are not our interests. But gold has intrinsic value. Well, check this out. A Bitcoin also has intrinsic value. And here's why. A gold is in the realm of atoms. It's limited by a certain number of atoms. But likewise, a Bitcoin is limited in its internal characteristics by the precise set of numerical computations that were required to mine that Bitcoin. And this is immutable, and this is transparent. So just as it's known how many atoms are in an ounce of gold, it's known the set of computations that were in that Bitcoin. And so you've got this thing of intrinsic value. It's just not corporeal. You can't touch it, but it is what you call tangible in one of the Oxford definitions of tangible, in that you can hold it in your mind. It's not a fake concept. It is the product of that set of computations. So you've got that idea, intrinsic value. And that's a good basis. And then you look at the underlying technology. Why is a Bitcoin worth so many dollars? Well, in this world that's run by people like the people that stole my company from me, trust has a lot of value. And being able to do business in a trusted fashion has a lot of value. And the underlying technology that Bitcoin relies upon, and that is in fact the prototypical application of value transfer upon, is called blockchain. And this blockchain provides immutability, means you can't change it. You can't mess it up if you're a bad actor. It provides transparency. Everyone can see what's going on, and thereby it provides trust. And so if you conduct your value transfers of these intrinsically valuable, in the realm of bits, Bitcoins, upon this network, that has tremendous value in today's world, that at every level of the world, there's some middleman and gatekeeper that might be trying to take your money. And this does big things to prevent that. And so this is why I believe that Bitcoin has value. It's the inherent value of the security, immutability, reliability of the network upon which it relies that makes this thing incredibly valuable in this world.
Beautiful. Please, guys, hand of applause. big long applause.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Pretty strong.
Are we done, or you want to do questions, or what?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know
so,
what our time is.
if we get kicked out of here, someone will flag me down. Yeah,
We'll do a few questions so we get kicked out.
He'll stall, guys. So what we'll do for questions,
Okay,
real
yeah,
fast, is please stand up, say your name, one sentence about what it is you're working on, totally cool. Please don't go into it. There'll be a chance for that. And then ask your question. Let's jump right into it. So, yeah, shoot.
So I'm Malbao. Yeah. And so one of the things that about Bitcoin, about the difficulty of creating Bitcoin, the kind of the intrinsic value, is that you got to burn all this electricity to get it, and that you have all these leading zeros. So what do you think about something like proof of stake, where there's not that commitment going into it?
Absolutely. There's this thing called proof of stake, which is a new way of ensuring the security of the network without doing all these computations that are currently, right now, do you know if you take the top 50 supercomputers in the world, they're all the processing power and they're working on gene sequencing and all this amazing stuff, 4% of the Ethereum network. So there's a lot of somewhat, you might say, wasted computations going on. And so I am all for the development of new ways. Like I'm really intrigued by Casper and the stuff the Ethereum network is doing to come up with this new way. Proof of stake, talk to me later about what that is. It's too much for right now. But yes, I think there's going to be much better ways. These are early days. And the underlying technology, it might not even be called blockchain once this all settles. It might be something else that provides all these same things.
Cool. Next question. Shoot.
All right, my name's Ingemar. I probably gave you a wristband.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my question is, what would stop? I guess what kind of makes the VR trading interface proprietary, and what would stop a competitor from doing the same thing?
Nothing would stop a competitor from doing the same thing, and I think that there's a value in just being the one that say, "Hey, this is the way we do things now." Yeah, that's not the end of the. I hope that happens eventually.
Yep. Shoot back.
Hi, I'm Monica.
Hi, Monica.
Hi. You had a lot of vaguely crypto anarchy things that came out of your mouth, which, for better or worse, we can talk about. But so there's we don't actually have to belong to a physical location anymore, and we can just take our money wherever we want. But how do you deal with the fact that paying taxes does things for living in a city where we have to have communal benefits, and having to do things like regulation? Oh, well, we don't need this whole accredited investor thing because anybody can invest in whatever they want, except that there are scammers out there that will take your money, and there's front running, and there's paying to tape, and there are all these things that are regulated for a reason. And then there's the fact that fiat currencies are inherently inflationary, which then means that you can't have all of these liquidity boosts that you get when you get the multiplicative effects of non-fiat currencies, such as the US dollar, and we don't use gold for a reason. So maybe all those things.
These are very good questions.
Yeah.
These are very good questions, and I don't claim to have the answer to all these at all. However, I know that the situation that we were in without this option was entirely undesirable, as not having the option to exit that system where you happen to be born, where it might not be the thing that you might not be in the best place. I mean, not everyone is born in the US, not to say that the US is necessarily the best place, but it provides optionality, let's say. But these are very good questions, and I don't have firm answers to these things.
Cool. Great thing for a discussion after.
Yeah.
Yeah, over there.
I just want to follow up with that. We had hundreds of years to figure out this system. We can take some time to figure out how to pay for our communal benefits.
Cool.
We got imagination, we can use it. That's all.
We got one more. Let's see. Is anyone that had their hand up for a long time? Yeah, please.
I know nothing about this. I do know a lot about the actual traditional markets, and I've worked even at the exchange. Been around. So the trust factor is beautiful, and a lot of my friends are really into what's going on because it seems like when it's up right now, everyone is winning, and when it slides down, people are losing. What about the black swan issue, where Nizam Talib would say, actually, it's not this perfect VR visualization, but it's a full anomaly when people really win once bigger players get involved. And now I don't know enough about decentralization to really ask this question properly, but I think that's what I'm wondering.
Well, I think that there's going to be a lot of volatility. I'm not one of these people that's saying crypto is just going to go up, 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 to the moon, because it's no market's like that. It's not going to be this thing that just goes up forever. That doesn't make any sense even. It wouldn't be good for it to be like that. And so I think that the basic thing that this does is it levels the playing field, and it brings a lot of opportunity to even participate in this to people that were completely locked out before. And I think that that is inherently an advantage, just being able to interact in this world when you're not someone that was born into a long line of wealthy bankers. So I think that the fact that it's leveling the playing field and allowing more people access to markets is a thing that helps that situation.
But having been involved in day trading in the infancy of it, like, I'm sure you have some thoughts as to like where that failed and where that.
Well, again, there was all these centralized systems that you would have to rely upon many people to keep their words up to higher and higher levels of power, that if they failed you'd lose. And so this provides technology that potentially allows for interactions in business that do not have that same weakness.
Cool. We are going to wrap up questions for now. Giovanni, definitely take your question a little later. But there's one last thing I want to say, and then we'll kick it around, not here, out there, which is, in the vein of community that we talked about, if you really want to make some of these friends who will bring you soup when you're sick, and who, you can have a tree house or other house varietal in a Telegram group, the one thing from sort of the touchy-feely vibes of the West Coast that I'm coming in here with that I can truly, truly recommend is that while asking somebody what they do is a perfectly fine way to start a conversation, the best way that I found to end or continue a conversation is to ask, what would help you right now? So you want to take that with you, you want to sit with that, and while you're having these conversations, sprinkle that in, maybe ask people what they've been thinking about lately, and have a little bit more of a realness to it. That's a great way to find soup in your life.
Cool.
Cheers.
Well said.
All right,
Well said.
guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Cool, we did it. That was awesome. Cheers.
You have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Well, we have to go out there and we're just going to go out there in the other room.